right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. And let me start by saying thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're so excited, or this afternoon, I should say. We're so excited to have you all here today for this conversation. Unfortunately, there's been a little bit of a hiccup here, and our guest speaker has not arrived to this Zoom call. And so, but luckily for us, we have two people hosting this call tonight that are both more than capable actually of introducing or discussing Soot with us. And both of them are ECA members, longtime ECA members, founding members of ECA. So tonight we're gonna actually, instead of hearing from Mona, unless Mona shows up here, maybe there's an internet issue or something, if Mona shows up, we will have Mona present. But we're going to go ahead and start off this afternoon with Hazel Chandler, who also happens to be my mother, a founding member of Elders Climate Action. And Hazel also works for the organization Moms Clean Air Force, which is a very close partner and ally of Elders Climate Action, and an organization that we often look to for guidance on, especially on issues around air pollution and things like that. So Hazel actually will present to us about Soot, and then also we'll be joined by Frances Stewart. And Frances is a doctor and actually has done a number of presentations on impacts of health and climate, and is also very knowledgeable, and actually just got off of doing another presentation literally minutes ago, and so is fully prepared to talk about Soot with us tonight. So we'll go ahead and move forward with this conversation. And if Mona shows up, that will be great. And we'll just sort of do it all. But I'm going to go ahead and turn the table over to Hazel to get us started. And Hazel, if you can maybe introduce yourself to start, and then I can pull up the slide deck. So welcome, Hazel and Frances. Thanks for being our guest speakers on a whim for tonight's call.
Well, thank you so much. It's so great to be here. It's always a little difficult to change, but in the day of internet and in the day of Zoom, we have to expect this, because it's not uncommon to have snafus and trying to join Zoom, or even the national news media has the same problem of sometimes their speakers can't get on. So it's just a real pleasure to be here. I've been actively involved in Elders Climate Action since the first Washington, D.C. event, like in 2014 or 2015, when Elders Climate Action was just getting started. I've been on the national board ever since, and worked on a lot of issues. I've been the Arizona State Chair, as well as worked on collaborations, which actually led me to become a contractor with Moms Clean Air Force in Arizona. I'm the state coordinator. This partnership has been amazing, and one of the things that I'm just really excited about is the work that both Elders Climate Action and Moms Clean Air Force, often in partnership, are doing to provide comments to the EPA. As you know, the Inflation Reduction Act passed the Congress in last August. And it was the greatest investment that we've ever made on climate. And it was a down payment. And the scientists and the experts told us that that would get us to around reduction in greenhouse gases of around 40% by 2030. But we've been told by the International Panel on Climate Change and others that we have to get to 50% by 2030. And the Biden administration has considered this carefully and has determined that the path to the other 10% is through new and more revised EPA rules. So these rules that we're working on, Soot is one of them. We've worked on methane. We've worked on several around diesel trucks. We just had a final rule yesterday from the EPA on the Good Neighbor Act, which is was regarding smog that and emissions from power plants that was crossing state lines. So there'll be more requirements in place very shortly on that issue. But and then we've got more to come. We've got ozone, and we've got a bunch of them to come over the next few months. Our participation, our comments, our reaching out to the EPA and getting our comments either through public testimony or putting comments into the docket are absolutely essential in getting this passed. And the Soot regulations are one that really impacts me personally. I'm a mom, a grandma, and a great grandma, and I have been living for many years with asthma, chronic inflammation, immune dysfunction, and stage 4 cancer. And one of the things that I've noticed, and my doctors have commented on, is every time the air quality goes up, I have serious consequences. We had a real bad spell in July with air quality issues in Arizona, and I developed a chronic cough. And it was something that all my medical doctors couldn't even stop. I mean, it was just really, really bad. And that coughing, according to my doctors, led to basically many compression fractures of my spine. And I've ended up having to have surgery, and it's been a really long journey. I'm coming back now, and it's good, but we have to address soot pollution as well as other air pollutants, because they're really impacting all of our health. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I'm going to go ahead and start my slides. And I just want to give a shout out. In case you're not familiar with Mom's Clean Air Force, I really suggest you go on their website, momscleanairforce.org. You have on that website a wealth of wonderful information that you can use in your work. Even some of that information is co-branded with Elders Climate Action. We did a document a couple years ago on climate change and children's health, and climate change and older people's health. But this website has a resource, a library of documents, like 2-page documents, very readable, very easy to understand and easy to share. So I really encourage you to check out that resource. Mom's Clean Air Force is dedicated to protecting our children from climate change and air quality and other issues that are environmental issues that are impacting our health. And it's really very similar to our mission as Elders, only it's focused more on the younger population. Okay, so what is soot? Soot goes by a number of different names, but it's the very, very fine 2.5 micron less diameters of particles that are in the air. Some of the names that it really has been referred to as particle pollution, fine particle pollution, particulate matter, or PM 2.5. You might often hear about PM 2.5 and PM 10. PM 2.5 is that very, very tiny particle, and the PM 10 is more like dust and the larger particles. These invisible particles are 30 times smaller than the width of a human hair. And you can think of them as microsoot. They're so tiny that they can easily be inhaled into the lungs and delivered directly in the bloodstream. And actually, they can go into virtually all of our organs and can cause multiple issues. Next slide. Where does soot come from? Soot, basically, it comes from burning fossil fuels and things like power plants, industrial processes, tailpipe, vehicle tailpipes, diesel exhaust is especially problematic and can cause a lot of health issues from the soot in the vehicle diesel exhaust. But it can also be generated from things like wildfires, agriculture, and tire friction on the roadways. Next. And then the question is, why is it so harmful? Due to its small size, soot can penetrate our lungs, bloodstream, and causes devastating health impacts. Some of them are premature death, disease, heart disease, aggravated asthma, decreased lung function, difficulty breathing, shorter life expectancies, greater rates of diabetes, cancer, kidney disease, and adverse pregnancy outcomes. We actually played a little game with our mom staff, and we tried to come up with things that were not linked to soot, and we had a lot of trouble coming up with things that were not linked with soot. Just saw a recent study that came out this week that even links it to osteoporosis, especially causing problems for postmenopausal women in the lumbar spine area, which is one of the areas that I have been having problems with compression fractures for last couple years. So probably even that is related to soot and soot outcomes. There's also, and we didn't really deal with this, but there's also a lot of links to issues around soot with preterm pregnancy, and also higher rates of birth defects, and they're even linking it to learning disabilities and autism and other issues such as that. So that's really, really concerning how broad the depth of this is. One of our health directors here was speaking, and what he said is, just like things like lead and mercury, there is no amount of soot that is okay in the body. Every breath we take that has soot in it has potential to do some harm. So we have to look at, we need to cut this level as much as possible. Next. There's also a lot of soot and health disparities. Communities of color and low wealth communities are much more likely to be exposed to soot and particle pollution, and therefore they bear disproportionate burden of health harms. Often communities of color and low wealth communities are located along freeways, along corridors where there are a lot of polluting businesses and other things, and so this is a real issue. want to give you just a little personal experience. Several years ago, I was in charge of the Maricopa County Asthma Coalition, and we were doing asthma education with our school districts in the lower income areas of and the areas of color in Arizona, Central Phoenix, West Phoenix, South Phoenix, those areas. And we were doing working with the Head Start programs and doing asthma evaluations on Head Start 4-year-olds, children. And it was really interesting to look at doing those evaluations in a school more North Phoenix, in the higher income areas. And then the lower income areas, and we found big differences in the number of children with severe respiratory issues and asthma between that. But one of the things that was really stuck out to me is we have several schools that are right along the freeway systems and near the airport. And those schools had kind of off the Richter scale level of asthma. Those children were exposed every single day when they go to school to really harmful levels of air pollution. Much of that is soot. So it's really concerning. Also, people of color are 61% more likely than white people to live in a county with unhealthy air quality. Black Americans and older, Black Americans 65 and older are 3 times more likely to die from exposure to fine particle pollution than white Americans. And there are other vulnerable populations, or children, older adults, pregnant people, people that work outdoors and with underlying health problems. Here in Arizona, we have some of the worst air quality of anywhere in the nation, and have had it for over 20 years. The American Lung Association annually puts out a State of the Air report, and we have received a failing grade for air quality ever since that came out in 2000. I think 2000 was the first year. But we're not alone. It's all over the United States that we have communities that are receiving failing grades. Here in Arizona, 70% of our residents are living in areas that have harmful air pollution issues and failing grades on the Lung Association report. Nationwide, that's somewhere between 60 and 70%. But the interesting thing is that a lot of this is urban communities, but there's a lot of issues in rural communities as well. And probably our information we're getting is not accurate on air quality issues in a lot of our rural communities, because they don't have the monitoring equipment to monitor like the larger areas have. That's starting to improve in the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Act. There has been funding put out for new monitoring equipment, mainly focused on tribal communities and rural communities. So I think we're going to be making some real progress along that line, but we still have a long ways to go on this. And one of the things that is really important is that not only we improve the regulations, but we also improve the ability to monitor and enforce the regulations as well. So let's go forward to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about EPA's role. EPA sets health-based standards for allowable levels of particle pollution through the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAQS. it rhymes with snacks, which helps you remember. But you know, if people are talking about NAAQS, they mean the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. Under the Clean Air Act, which was put into place in the 70s, actually, the EPA is required to review the National Ambient Air Quality Standards for particle pollution every 5 years. Such standards have not been updated since 2012. There was some updates in 2012. During the last administration, I think 2016, 2017, they took a look at the standards as required by the NAAQS, but decided that even though their scientists told them it would save hundreds of thousands of lives by enacting stronger standards, they decided to do nothing. This is our opportunity to do something, and we're really happy that the EPA has proposed these standards, but it's not enough. The EPA creates two kinds of particle pollution standards. There's the annual average, which takes all of the year-round data from the area of particle pollution and averages it out. And then there's the 24-hour average. Both are really, really important measures. The annual average tells us how much we're exposed to on an ongoing basis. But some of the most damaging soot is those 24-hour peaks. It addresses those daily spikes in particle pollution such as bursts of pollution from fuel combustion, industrial facilities. Those of you that live near industrial facilities, sometimes when they're flaring off methane and natural gas, not natural gas, fossil gas. This is what we like to be calling it. Those levels spike to really, really unhealthy levels. Things like wildfires or other times that there's really high spikes to dangerous levels. Let's go to the next slide. On January 6th, the long-awaited proposal for the soot regulations finally came out. We'd been waiting for it. We thought it was coming out in August. So we were preparing and ready to respond, but it finally was released in January. For a new annual pollution standard that is in step in the right direction, but does not go far enough. EPA didn't even propose a change to the 24-hour and the daily standards. What was proposed by EPA on the annual standards was 9 to 10, and Mom's was asking 8. And this is also what Elders Climate asked. These are this recommendation of the 8 was really important because that's what the EPA's own scientific panel came back and said was would save at least I think the latest is 15 to 16,000 lives daily if they changed it from 9 to 10 to 8. The change from 12 to the current 12 to to 8 would could save over 100,000 lives a year. So it's a big deal. They chose not to propose any new changes on 24-hour daily standards, but Elders Climate Action, moms, and most of the groups are all recommending the 25. Let's go on. So, what is our top line message? Our top line message is we all need to breathe clean air. And we need to send out the message that the Environmental Protection Agency proposed such standards as a step in the right direction. Doesn't go far enough. Soot's also known as to particle pollution, is not healthy to breathe. But basically, I would add there that it's not only not healthy to breathe, but no amount of soot is healthy. Mom's Clean Air Force, Elders Climate Action. Again, we want to ask the EPA for the more protective standard for soot of 8 micrograms per cubic meter for the annual standard and 25 micrograms per cubic meter for the daily standard. You just kind of remember that. Next.
I think that brings us to our action, but I'm going to actually pass it first to, I'm going to stop screen share for a moment and pass it over to Frances Stewart to see. Frances, is there anything you want to add to the conversation here? I know that you have really done a lot of research specific to soot and its impacts on the brain. Is there anything you want to add to the conversation here before we jump to taking action and our Q&A? We'll do a Q&A next and then taking action. So if anybody has any questions for Hazel or Frances, please put them in the chat box. And
Jen, can I share a screen?
Yes, you should be able to share a screen.
Okay, so I've got one slide that I think might be interesting to look at. And this is about the effects of PM 2.5, basically the very fine particles in soot on the brain. We know that if you look at experimental models of the human brain, that PM 2.5 can induce neuroinflammation, basically inflammation in the brain, and neurodegeneration. Now, if you're exposed to PM 2.5 for a short period of time, that's associated with what we call impaired executive functioning, basically what your brain does to kind of keep you on track and to keep things sorted out. Longer term exposure to PM 2.5 is associated with a number of things. We know it's associated with stroke, with various forms of dementia, including Alzheimer's disease, with disorders on the autism spectrum, with Parkinson's disease, mild cognitive impairment, and with depression. There's other concern about other brain dysfunctions that haven't been adequately researched yet, but these are pretty solid. And these are things that are of great concern to many people, including to many elders. You can kind of see here how this works. How does this stuff get into your brain? You breathe it, how does it get there? Basically, you breathe it in, it goes up to your nose. The nerves in your nose are actually an extension of nerves in the brain, so it can travel up that way. It can go down into the lungs. It can affect the brain just on its effects, other parts of the body, but also it can travel through the bloodstream. And these particles are very, very fine, and the body really doesn't have a good way of breaking them down or getting rid of them. Other thing about soot I thought was worth mentioning is we've been talking a lot about the health effects of soot, which are really very important, but it's also important as a climate pollutant. We talk a lot about greenhouse gases, and soot's technically not a gas, but it's small enough that it travels through the atmosphere And it's one of the strongest climate pollutants we know of. The good thing about it is it only lasts in the air about 2 weeks. Unlike, say, carbon dioxide, which is going to be around for much longer after that when we get it into the air. So if we make significant cuts in the soot that we're putting into the air, we're going to be seeing a positive effect on the climate and a positive effect on our health pretty quickly. I mean, because we're going to be seeing levels falling within a couple of weeks if we stop putting so much of it out there. So,
and essentially that means instant results in communities, instant health improvements. As soon as we start to cut the soot pollution, we start to improve the health and well-being of communities in a very short amount of time. So that's seems like a real no-brainer. I just saw and maybe Hazel, maybe you can speak to this a little bit, but I just saw or Frances, a study that came out, and I haven't had a chance to really look at it, but linking air pollution to osteoporosis. I think Columbia University just released a study. So just another, it's affecting our brains, it's affecting our lungs, it's affecting our bones, it's affecting our hearts, it's affecting us from completely. And that's why we're really pushing for this standard of 8 rather than the 9 to 10 annual average. Or we need the tightened standards so that we can protect our health and save lives ultimately.
Yeah, that study just came out, and I can make sure that Jen gets a link to it right away, or there's a really good overview on monscleanairforce.org web that actually talks about that study. But it's a very extensive study of postmenopausal women and osteoporosis, and they found that being exposed to nitrous oxide, which is part of the soot, it greatly increases the risk of and the severity of osteoporosis. It's interesting that the study specifically found that most of the worst of the breakdowns was in the lumbar spine area, which is the lower spine, and hips. And that's one of the areas where I have had several compression fractures with really no cause. I mean, literally, one of them I think might have had, I was lifting maybe a 20-pound box of tile. But basically those compression fractures have just happened from things like coughing and sneezing and just going about my daily life. So this has a huge impact. And I know so many women that are struggling with osteoporosis and have no idea. I mean, I had no idea that there was a link. The other thing is that burning fossil fuels and all of the soot producing processes, even wildfires, also release a lot of cancer-causing chemicals like dioxins and so on into the air that end up causing impacts on our health as well. So, this has just a huge health impact for all of us. And I can't stress enough how excited I am that we have an opportunity. We've worked quite a lot with EPA. We're working with EPA in Region 9, which is California, Arizona, Nevada. We're also working with national EPA, and they want our help, because they need cover to be able to take these strong approaches. we got much better than expected results on the good neighbor rules. It just came down yesterday. And probably the reason we got such good results is all of the agencies and groups came together, and we united our voices. We testified at the hearings. We submitted comments. You know, these comments are, I think we were close to 1 million comments on methane, and we're hoping to even outdo that on soot. So these are giving the EPA cover, so to say, to go strong, to be bold. And so it's really, really important that everyone takes action.
And can you just real quick, just tell us briefly, give us a brief description of what the Good Neighbor Rule does, what its purpose is? And we had called on ECA members back last year, I think it was like March or May or something of last year, to submit comments on Good Neighbor Rule. And so some of y'all submitted comments, so we thank you for taking that action. But can you tell us a little bit about the Good Neighbor Rule and what that is?
Good Neighbor Rule, basically the way things are right now is the states basically control the emissions from the power plants, and both coal and natural gas, and a lot of other pollution sources. And you sometimes have, you know, like a coal-fired power plant that's on the border of one or more other states. And basically those other states get the worst of the smog or the emissions, air pollutants from that power plant, but yet that state can't do anything about it. And this rule now would require that consideration of across a state. They would have to put protections in to protect neighboring states from getting the impacts of the pollution generated on the state line. And this is a huge step. I mean, this is really a really important step to first get the states to working together on this, but making sure that if one state has really lax regulations and another state has strict regulations, that the power plant or whatever has to abide by those stricter regulations.
And real quick before we jump into the questions, and Frances, I think I'll just field the questions today and lob them to the two of you, since you're you're our guest speaker tonight.
Grab some water real quick.
But I think that one of the questions that I think comes up a lot is sort of, we talk about wildfire as soot pollution, but wildfire is a form of pollution that we can't control. And so can you speak for a minute maybe on the importance of why stronger regulations to curb industry are so important, so that we are making room for these increased wildfires? Or maybe I just said it all there, but do you want to speak to that at all?
I mean, it really is additive. That wildfires, we've always had wildfires, and certainly in the West, wildfires are a natural part of the environment. What we're seeing now is more severe wildfires and wildfire seasons that are, you know, longer and longer and more frequent. And these big fires, you're likely to get soot going farther. And someone commented that they live in Western North Carolina and they've been getting soot from wildfires in the West. I mean, I was looking at a story on the bootleg fire in Oregon, and you know, they had significant pollution from that as far away as Boston and North Carolina. So we are definitely seeing more of that. And there's only so much we can do to control that. Certainly, many people are working on the fire issue and trying to get fire back down to kind of its natural role in the ecosystem and not these huge, frequent, severe fires. But that's really a difficult process. What's a lot easier is dealing with emissions from things like fossil fuels, also agricultural burning that isn't really necessary. Like in Florida, there's significant problems with them burning the sugarcane fields as an agricultural practice, and that produces a lot of pollution, particulates and other things. So, controlling the sources that we can from transportation, from buildings, that sort of thing. While we're still working on the fire problem, I think is really the way to go.
Mhm.
Jen,
Yes.
just there's things that sometimes you don't think about as sources of soot. One of the things that triggers a lot of health issues for the Arizona area is fireworks. We end up with a soot violation on 4th of July, really big one. And we also have violations every New Year's and other times when they're doing a lot of fireworks. So, something as simple as, first place, it's crazy to have fireworks in the desert. I mean, it's just absolutely craziness. But something as simple as outlawing fireworks could make a difference in the health of a lot of people in the Phoenix area. One of the things we know is that on the 4th of July and on New Year's and around that period, when there's a lot of fireworks and a lot of wood-fired fireplaces being used, we always have a soot alert and a pretty serious soot alert. And our hospital admissions and our doctor's offices have lines out the door with people having serious issues, including heart attacks and asthma and respiratory issues. And, some of us that are really sensitive, I can pretty well guarantee that over the holidays, I'm going to be sick. And sometimes those episodes that trigger it at the holidays last for months, because it seems like the pollution triggered kinds of respiratory issues are incredibly hard to get out of the body. And the regular medicines that you use for respiratory issues, don't touch it. You start coughing and you can take every cough medicine in the book and decongestants and all those things, and it doesn't work. So this is a huge issue. And an issue we haven't talked about at all on soot is the medical costs of it.
Mhm.
That every time we have air pollution alerts around here, we see spikes of ER admissions and urgent care admissions, and all of those have a lot of costs behind them. And so it's not only a health issue, but it's also an economic issue because it costs us a whole lot of medical costs to take care of those people that are expressing the issues.
We got two questions here that I want to make sure we get to, and then I want to make sure we get to talking about action and what we can do and how we can add our voice to this conversation and in making this request for these standards, these stronger standards from the EPA. So I want to make sure we get there. I think, Frances, I'm going to lob this first one to you. Based on your own experiences with health issues and your research on neurophysiology, respectively, what levels of soot and NOx would you say are health productive for children and women living with health conditions exacerbated by fine and ultralight particle pollutions? Is 8 nanograms, assuming no other short spikes, peaks as mentioned? Or have you, in your research, should it actually be even stronger than 8? I know that I think NRDC and some of the larger greens have done some published studies that suggest that we should be aiming for 8, but I'm assuming we should be aiming for as low as we can go. But
I think, there's, as Hazel said, there's no safe level. And, if we go to the 8 and 25 standard, that'll be one of the most stringent standards in the world. I don't know technically if it's feasible to, on a nationwide level to go lower. Certainly people who are particularly vulnerable, can take extra precautions, things like some of the masks that we've been using for COVID, the very protective masks can be helpful in some settings. Using HEPA filters can be helpful. Of course, you can't HEPA filter the whole, outside air. Getting this, the ambient air down as low as we can go, and also paying some attention to what's going on in our own homes. Like, gas stoves are a whole nother discussion. But if you're concerned about, air pollution because you're particularly vulnerable, or just because it's a concern for everyone, getting sources of combustion out of your house, especially a gas range, is going to be really helpful with that. So trying to go down as low as we can go as a country, but also reducing the sources that you have more control over, I think, is probably the way to go.
Yeah, Jen, the World Health Association says that it should be at 5. But I think that's a step that's probably way too fast. It's too much of a leap right now. We have to go to a level that we have the technology so that we can meet these levels. I think 8 is doable, but I think if we get much lower than that, it's probably going to be too much of a leap.
And then another question here, and thank you for clarifying that. I had heard 5 from World Health Organization also. So thanks for clarifying that. Pollution from traffic. Does anyone know the relative impacts of congestion and idling versus speeding and particles from the road, and independent of fuel choice?
Oh, it does get complicated because it's going to depend on the type of vehicle. We talk mostly about the pollution that comes from burning fossil fuels, and that's the biggest part of it. You do get fine particulates from a tire wear. So if you want to drive this down as low as possible, you need to drive down vehicle miles traveled. So there just aren't so many tires getting worn out or worn, not necessarily worn out, and spewing tiny little particles you can't see into the air. Anything that's going to increase fuel consumption, whether it's idling or speeding, lots of stopping and starting if you don't have regenerative braking, which most internal combustion cars won't have. Anything that's going to increase the amount of gasoline you burn or the amount of diesel fuel that you burn, because diesel is particularly bad for this, is going to increase the number of particulates you have. I don't know if anybody's ever studied it, but I would imagine that if you are one of these people who likes to screech every time you hit the brakes and take off like a jackrabbit, that you probably put more tire particles into the air. But I don't know if anyone's ever studied that.
I think our resident expert on transportation, Bob Yunke, might have some sense of that through all of his circles. So maybe we'll have to ask that question of him at some point. I just want to jump back to action real quick before this call is over. And so I'm going to screen share for just a second. Let me go back to, sorry, I should have been better about getting myself ready to screen share again. Okay, and are we able to see this slide, Frances and Hazel? Mm-hmm. So take action. I just dropped 2 links. I actually dropped 3 links in the chat box for you, but the first 2, the first link in there you'll see is the bit.ly /EPA Soot link. And This is a quick action that you can take to submit a comment to the docket. We have drafted a comment for you. It's here in this right-hand section, and you can personalize. Oops, I didn't mean to click forward. You can personalize the message there on the right, and customize the message with your own. And we encourage you to do that. Please, especially if you're experiencing any health impacts caused by soot, please modify this message and include some of your story and specifically how soot is impacting your life. That is the really important action for getting our stories of how soot is impacting us into the minds and the hearts of every person who's making these decisions, these regulatory decisions. So we've created a sort of a canned message with the ask of what we're asking for. So the 8 micrograms per cubic meter and the 5 grams per cubic meter, 24-hour standard. But please add to your story. And then if you just fill in your name, address, and information, it will automatically send it to the EPA docket for you. So you don't have to do anything there. But if you are interested in writing your own comments to the EPA and submit them yourself, not use our comment, and you can do both. And I would encourage you actually to do both, because it's okay to comment multiple times and do multiple comments from what I've been told from other people. You can use our talking sheet that both the comment and the talking sheet were created by our coalition that we're a part of called the Breathe Again Collaborative. And that's a number of organizations, including Moms Clean Air Force is involved in that coalition, as well as a number of our other great partners, United Women in Faith and the People's Justice Council and a bunch of Interfaith Power and Lights and things. So we worked together to draft this info sheet and that comment that I just showed you to help you be able to navigate writing your own comment and submitting it through the EPA. So at the very bottom, you will see a link to this bit.ly EPA Soot PM rule link that you can click, and that link will take you to the EPA's website to file a comment directly into the docket that way. You'll have to type the comment up and do all those parts. So 2 different ways that you can take action, but we want to make it easy for you to be able to submit comments and take action. So either submitting a comment on your own using our talking points or any of our partners' talking points. All of the climate movement is working on this issue. So we encourage you to use anybody's comment. The most important thing is that you submit one. And again, using our quick action is a really easy way to do that. So I just wanted to sort of point to those things. They're in the chat box for you, and I will make sure they also are in our follow-up email that goes out tomorrow. Everyone will receive a recording of this call and the resources that have been shared tonight. And then the last thing I shared in the chat box, and Hazel made mention of the American Lung Association Clean Air Report, and I'll make sure to include a link to that tomorrow. I don't have that link for you right now to drop in, but I'll include that in the recording. But there was an article recently released in The Guardian that you all might find really interesting. And it is called Revealed, the 10 Worst Places to Live in the US for Air Pollution. And so check that list, see if your community is on there, or a community that you live close to is on there. And investigate, do a little bit of research to learn more about how air pollution is impacting your community through this Guardian article, and then also through this State of the Air report that we will share with you tomorrow. The one last thing I want to say is next week, and let me just get to my note here. Don't forget to mark your calendars for our next national call. In this together, connecting with your community to combat the climate crisis. Drawing on exciting new social science research, author and professor and longtime ECA member Marianne Krasny will describe network climate action, or how we can influence our close friends and family to take action alongside us. So that should be a really exciting and interesting national call, and we're really excited to help support Marianne's new book as it comes out. And I'm dropping the link in the chat box to register for for that national call. And I'll make sure again that link gets included in the follow-up email for tomorrow. I would just like to say thank you so much to both Hazel and Frances for your flexibility and your ability to take over on the fly for Mona. I hope that everything's okay with Mona. I'm guessing maybe there was some sort of emergency that distracted her from being able to join us tonight. And so we'll all just send good energy to her, hoping that she is okay and that everything is okay. And maybe we'll be able to bring her back at a different time. But this, I think, has turned out to be an excellent session, and it's always so good to hear directly from ECA members who are out there and doing this work. And we appreciate all of your leadership. Both Hazel and Frances have been longtime members of ECA's leadership team. And so thank you again for on the fly, being able to talk to us about Soot and have such a great conversation.
Just, can I put one plug in?
Sure.
We will have the ozone rules coming up to the EPA very shortly. And I'm putting a bug in your, it's addictive to testify to these EPA hearings. I've testified, I think, 9 times now, 9 hearings, and I've recruited a lot of people and worked with them on, we had 15 people from Arizona that were testifying last time, plus a bunch of the other elders climate action people from across the US. Please join us. It's fun. And our voices, I mean, they said, oh, it's so good to hear your stories. They would like to hear our stories.
And you know, if you're wanting to testify and you're feeling intimidated by it all, send us an email and I'll connect you up with the talking points that you'll need in order to be able to testify. So if ever the barrier for you is feeling like you don't have all the information you need in order to testify, contact us, reach out to us. We will put you in contact with the information that you need in order to be able to feel comfortable in testifying. So, but I totally agree with Hazel. Testify. It's so good when we use our voice. And there's a lot of opportunities within the EPA coming ahead here in the next year. So we're going to be calling on you to take action and to take action regularly with us. So thank you so much. I want to respect everybody's time and say good night or good afternoon. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.